Welcome to the Nitpicking Nerd's Guide to Counterspells.
In this video, we're going to be talking about which counter magic is worth playing in Commander.
I'm your host, Joe Cherries.
I'm your host, Beezy, and that makes us the Nitpicking Nerds. One piece of housekeeping before we begin the video. We have announced the winner of our Twitter giveaway for a Secret Lair Walking Dead box. It is Brother and Anansi. You've already been notified. You know it, but now everybody else knows that the Twitter event giveaway is done. There's still one for Patreon. We'll probably announce that later this week.
Yes, I was getting all excited for Brother Anansi. So, counter spells. This is what we're talking about here. Which ones are good? What are the expectations? What are the standards? And what are the priority lists? We're going to go over all that in this video. What do we start with here, though?
It sounds almost like a documentary. Like if it was like, let's dive in together. Well, what is counter magic? We are using the term counter magic over a counter spell. Counter spell is more of a shorthand. I wouldn't say that all magic, counter magic, I think of as counter spells. So we're defining counter magic as a spell or ability that removes a spell or ability from your opponent's stack. As far as I know, this is pretty exhaustive. We had to refine the definition a couple of times. What we do is we make it and then we try to break it. And we couldn't do that with this one.
Yeah, exactly. We did break it. We had to change a couple wordings around. We're not going to tell you how, though.
Yeah, the process is hidden.
Exactly.
So that could be something that counters a spell, returns a spell to its owner's hand, stops the spell from resolving because, like something that ends the turn. We're not even talking about those, but anything that can, gain control of a spell, that's all going to fall under the umbrella of counter magic.
Yes. We did not count, however, things like deflecting swat, which changed the target of spells, because they're still technically opponent spells. There could be argument made that maybe they are counter spells, but they're not going to be in this video.
Yes.
So hopping right in, we have the expectations and standards. What do we expect from our counter spells? Well, we don't expect a lot, but most importantly is that it doesn't cost very much. Free ones, 1 mana, super awesome.
That's because whatever spell our opponent casts, we want to be trading up on mana. If I counter your 7-drop with a 1-drop, it feels amazing. Also, a lot of counter spells in general, they're 1-for-1s trading. So just keep that in mind. So if I'm trading 1-for-1, I can still go up on mana, kind of bridge the gap of I'm down a card, but I'm up 6 mana from their thing.
Yes. Another important thing about that is you don't want to leave up 7 mana. If your counter spell costs 7 mana, leaving up 7 mana is not an easy task to do, especially in a deck that isn't normally playing an instant speed.
Right. So if we're not talking about mana cost, the next best thing is versatility. Counter spells are not always the best thing to have. If the threat already hit the table, every straight up counter spell does nothing to stop that threat. So if your counter spell can also bring it back to their hand, gain control of it, remove it somehow, then that's just extra, and that's what we're going to be paying more mana for. There's obviously not a 1 mana counter spell that just does whatever you want. So we are going to take a trade off for mana and versatility. So some of our counter spells are cheap. Maybe all of them are cheap, or maybe some of them are cheap, and some of them are super versatile.
Yes, I think mana cost is it's by far the most important thing. I don't know if we said that, but above and beyond, if you can get it, that's why free counter spells are insane.
That's number 1. Number 2 is versatility. What's number 3?
It is usable without a spell to target. So a great example of, I was going to go into examples, but basically it has some other way to use the spell. It's not just a counter spell, but maybe it cycles, something along those lines.
Yeah, that's a little different from versatility. Versatility, we're kind of saying, when you cast it, what does it do? Mm-hmm. And this is, do you even have to cast it? Can you cast it without having countered a spell at all?
Yeah, if there's nothing on the stack, can you still cast the spell? That's what we mean. And that's the third thing. But that's it. You don't need too much out of your counter spell, but you need it to do one of these very well, pretty much. That's where you're at. Because if it's not doing one of these very well, then you probably don't want it, because there's a lot of good counter spells.
Seriously, I'll just say, if you are looking at your deck or your trade binder deck or your deck that you have or deck that you bought, if there's a counter spell that doesn't check one of these 3 boxes, you can just instantly cut it.
Now we're hopping into the best of the best. These are the best counter spells in all of VDH.
Yes, the magic we play, we're usually around, we're talking, how about, anywhere from a power level 1 to a power level 9. This is what this is going to encompass. 10 being CDH, we have a little subcategory for that. So this is 1 to 9. This is pretty much the best you're going to get. And I don't really consider counter spells that aren't these, because, like I was going to say earlier, but I forgot, but I just remembered, your deck doesn't need that many counter spells. Yes. You're going to play 3, 5. 7. I mean, you're not going to play more than 10 ever. So once you figure out, hey, I want counterspells. Well, there's not like there's a ton of counterspells that have synergy with specific decks. So you're going to find like the best 5 for you. Maybe you're on a budget, the best 5 budget ones, and then that's it. You're done.
Exactly, yeah. So you don't have to stretch much past these. So the first one is Swansong. What's that do?
Blue, instant, counter an enchantment, instant, or sorcery. The controller of that spell gets a 2/2 flyer.
Yeah, so it's just very efficient counterspell. It doesn't hit artifacts and doesn't hit creatures, and planeswalkers. But anything other than that, you're just going to counter it. They're going to get a bird, and it's only 1 mana. Super awesome. We talked about how good mana cost is.
It checks efficiency, doesn't really check versatility, and it doesn't check the usable not as a counterspell. But the fact that it's 1 mana, you barely have to hold up anything. It's almost trivial to hold this up. Swansong, there's a reason it's like $8 or $9. And I think the budget version of Swansong is Stubborn Denial. Blue for an instant. Counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. Okay, wait, there's more text. If you control a creature power 4 or greater, just counters a non-creature spell.
Yes, so with this one, I'd say if your commander has a power of 4 or greater, you really start considering this, or you're Voltroning up. Anything where a deck is going to consistently have a creature out with 4 or greater, and this is just going to be the other half, a 1 mana negate usually.
Yes, I have also completely gotten people on turn 1 when they play Soul Ring with it.
Yeah,
that's complete. Like, that's just a little bit of a chef's kiss.
That's gravy on top of it, because you're not looking to do that, but sometimes it's going to come up. It's just going to happen. You'll have an open hand and be like, well, why not play this island on tap instead?
The spell's good. Force Spike is terrible. But Stubborn Denial, I think, crosses the threshold to be good. I've played it quite a bit. Yeah. All right, next in the 2 mana ones, first one's Arcane Denial, counter target spell. I like it. At the beginning of the next upkeep, the spell's controller draws 2 cards, and you draw 1 card. Why do we like this so much, even though it's card disadvantage?
It's card disadvantage, but what's happening here is you're going to get your card back for it. Basically, it's telling you that you get to draw a card right away, and it gives them 2 cards back. But again, the spell's gone. It's in the graveyard because you countered it, and then you get your card back. They get 2, but hey, we play better cards, right?
Not all spells are created equal in Commander. So 2 cards is not necessarily the value of 1 spell. And you not being down on the exchange is like one of the most important things. It nullifies the whole 1-for-1, each other opponent is up a card type shenanigans, because you're just, shenanigans, of course, short for shenanigans, because you're just now even on cards.
I didn't know you need to explain that.
I wasn't sure. I was like, that's a weird abbreviation that I use for no reason.
I think the fans understand shenanigans.
Shenanigans.
The fans understand shenanigans. That rhymed. Next, Disdainful Stroke. I think it's more of a budget one, usually, but it's 1 in a blue counter target spell that costs 4 or more. This card's great in budget. It's like 10 cents because it was just reprinted in like War of the Spark or something.
A common.
It's
always been a common. It's been printed like 4 times.
Yes, exactly. So it's very cheap. If you, and also the lower power level you go, the more bigger and splashier the spells tend to get. So this card is great.
Well, yeah, lower power level. There's no Thassa's Oracle end in the game every time. The cards that win, the winningest cards are going to be like, I'm thinking like Aetherflux Reservoir, like Bolas's Citadel. There's Expropriate. There's Craterhoof. There's like Tooth and Nail. There's Kiki Jiki. I don't know.
This is higher power level than
I was going to say higher. Okay, wait. Grave Titan.
You were talking.
Counters Grave Titan.
Yeah, you were talking about like 7 to like 9 power level. I was thinking.
Like 4.
I was thinking things like Grave Titan level, like
Rampaging Bailouts.
Yeah, exactly. Cards we don't advocate for. Next counterspell, blue, counter target spell.
Wow. One thing that I wanted to mention now and not earlier is Arcane Denial and Disdainful Stroke sometimes get the nod because counterspells blue. The fact that they are 1 in a blue means if you're like a 4-color deck, maybe you don't want to play blue counter a spell. So mana is also a consideration in those cards.
Yes, exactly. Also, the Arcane Denial getting your card back, I will play it over counterspell most of the time.
Definitely, every time.
But in a mono blue deck, it doesn't feel bad to play counterspell.
I'm kind of fallen out of favor with counterspell. I don't think it cracks my top 10 or my top 6 anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get into it. There's plenty of good ones on here.
Still very playable.
Oh, I got to read this next one.
Go ahead.
Warping Whale. This is my personal favorite. Probably my favorite one on the list because it's so like out of left field. It's 1 in a Wingding for an instant. You choose 1. There's 3 modes. You can either exile a creature with power or toughness 1 or less, create a 1/1 Scion that sacrifices for colorless mana, or you can counter target sorcery spell. Counter sorcery is pretty meh in terms of like what Countermagic can do, but it's versatile. You can use it as a terrible ritual or a chump blocker, but mostly it's going to remove like a utility creature with the other ability, and it exiles.
Yeah, and really important to point out about this one is that it's not blue. It is a color. This is so important to this.
The biggest thing.
It is colorless. It can go in a mono red deck, a mono white deck, a Boros deck, any deck like that. And that is the difference between this card being complete garbage. This costs 1 in the blue. This card is trash.
I'm just wondering why it exists if it costs 1 in the blue. Yeah, the fact that you can put this in your mono white deck and protect from board wipes, just straight up, nope, counter that. I countered a Great Aurora with this and almost, saved the whole game.
Love it.
He just cast it next turn. But I still stopped the game from ending in mono white where they, what does mono white ever do against Great Aurora?
It's so funny. Next we have delay, which is 1 in the blue instant. You exile target spell with 3 time counters on it. It gains suspend.
If it doesn't have suspend.
If it doesn't. And then, so what suspend says, at the beginning of each of its controller's upkeep, you remove a counter until if there's 0, you get to cast it without paying its mana cost. And if it's a creature, it gains haste.
Yes. Delay is something I haven't really played too much, but I think it falls into the Arcane Denial. Like, I might like it more than Counterspell. It might not matter that the spell comes around eventually. If your meta is fast-paced, this can just say 1 in a blue, not even Counterspell, exile a spell for the rest of the game.
And also on top of what you're saying, in the early game, it can take away a spell that might be super relevant, and it might be less relevant when it comes back.
Like Soul Ring.
Or in the late game, it might just never come back, like you said.
Well, how about the added bonus of, if I counter expropriate, it's gone. But if I delay expropriate, that person's going to die. Mm-hmm. They're about to die to combat or combos or whatever else. Like, huge target. So it's like political too.
Yeah. Next, Dovin's Veto. Actually, I want to state here with Dovin's Veto, because it's blue and a white, counter target non-creature spell. This spell can't be countered. That I don't like negate, and I wouldn't play negate too often, but I think Dovin's Veto, I know it costs an extra pip of white, but the fact that it can't be countered puts it so far above negate for me. I would never, I don't think I would ever touch negate, and I would play Dovin's Veto in a heartbeat.
Well, negate I have as totally playable if you're on a budget. It's like perfect. It's like right there with Disable Stroke for me on a budget. Dovin's Veto is actually just an amazing card. It's no counterspell war. Nope. Spell's gone. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Dovin's Veto is very, very good. That's all. There's nothing even to say about it. I think negate only on a budget, and only if you need it. Dovin's Veto, plain blue-white, strongly consider it.
You actively want it. It's in your top 5.
This next one is great too. It's Drowned in the Lock. Blue and a black for an instant. Choose one. Counter target spell with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard. Choice 2. Destroy target creature with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard.
As long as you're cool with this being a late game spell, or you've got ways to put stuff in their graveyard, or you're in a higher power meta where there's fetch lands and thought scours or whatever else flying around, this card's amazing. It is never dead because you're always killing the best threat, whether it's on the stack or on the field.
That's the versatility we talked about that you want, and it's only 2 mana. So answering something on the field or on the stack really makes this card a lot better. And if you're playing in higher power levels, things don't cost a lot. If they fetch once, you can counter a lot of their spells in the high power level.
Like 30% of their spells now. All right, now we're going to move into the 3 mana ones, and there's a pretty big drop off after you get to 3. My standards get a bit higher.
A lot higher.
All right, first one, Archmage's Charm. Blue, blue, blue for an instant. You choose one, draw 2 cards, counter target spell, or gain control of a non-creature artifact, mana cost 1 or less. All 3 modes are pretty good. The worst mode is counter a spell, but it's stapled onto instant speed divination and potentially swing the whole game by stealing an artifact like that.
Yep, this one is absolutely all about versatility. I think it's only a mono blue card. I don't think you get to play this anywhere else due to the 3 blue pips in it, but I think it's very good in mono blue decks.
You could probably swing it in like blue-white control. Yeah. It might be up there enough, but you got Dovin's Veto, so you might not need it. You also have Render Silent. That was not intended as to be a segue.
Yes, we have white, blue, blue, counter target spell. Its controller can't cast spells for the rest of the turn.
Yeah, if this kind of depends. If you're this big swingy Grave Titan meta where, you can cast 6-drop and nothing else, this is bad. Mm-hmm. But if they're going to start off with some stupid ritual or they're going to flashback past in flames, there's a couple spells that would indicate a lot more spells being cast. Bolas' Citadel is one. You just go, not only is that going to get countered, you don't get to follow it up with anything.
Yeah, it's also good if they say they have a ball citadel they untap, which does happen sometimes.
Yeah.
They go with their first spell off the top, you go counter it, okay, now you can't do anything for the rest of this turn.
That's actually brutal. Yeah, once it can help, even if things are getting out of hand, it can help with that. Like, if they take an extra turn and you counter the first spell that turn, did they really take an extra turn?
Yes, they did.
They did, but they mostly just drew a card and untapped.
The last one is Lapse of Certainty.
I wanted to mention this. It's 2 and a white, counter a spell. If the spell would be countered, instead put it on top of its owner's library. This is really, if you're desperate for a counter spell in Boros that isn't Warping Wheel, which is better, then you can go with Lapse of Certainty. I think if you're going deeper than Warping Wheel, Lapse of Certainty, you're going too far. It's not that worth it to have a counter spell. It's not like every deck needs to have counter spells in it.
Yeah, I wouldn't play it ever personally. That's my opinion. BZ's played it though, and he has had good experiences.
Well, I've played it. It's a little lackluster. It's okay with Sunforger. Maybe you could do that over Warping Wheel if you're trying to Sunforge.
Yeah. Next we have Patron Wizard, still in the 3s here. Blue, blue, blue for a wizard with a power and toughness doesn't matter. Tap a wizard, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1.
This is actually, I nonchalantly put it in my tribal wizard deck. It says wizard on it. It's like completely amazing. It ruins the whole game.
Yeah, it's just if you're playing in a wizard's deck, it's good. It's just very, very good, and that's all there is to it. If you have 5 wizards out in this, to cast your best spells, you have to have 5 extra mana, and that's not good.
I genuinely was surprised with how easily I won games with this card, where you go wizard, turn 3, wizard, turn 4, patron wizard, and then no one can do anything. It was really weird. It didn't seem like multiple force spikes would matter, although I will add they can do it the turn they come out. They don't need to tap. It's not them tapping, it's patron wizard tapping them.
Yes, it is very strong. And he taps himself, so he always got 1 to go, even if he's the only one on the field.
Right. Generally, if he's out early, and if he's out late, I'll say we're not going to talk about that because you could have 12 wizards at that point. So if he's out early, the opponents either have a relevant spell that you care about, or they don't. If it's a relevant spell, it's probably going to kill Patron Wizard. If it does, counter it, and then it's up to the other players to have something. And if they don't, you just let it go. And the last person before you, if no one answers Patron Wizard, they just lose a spell and for free. It's the worst feeling.
Yeah.
They go cultivate, and you're like, no, it's free.
I think it's interesting. We're moving into 4 mana now, and there's a lot of creatures in this 4 mana slot, which is strange, but I think it's because they obviously don't want Counterspell on like a 2 mana creature, because how insane would that be?
It'd be stupid.
Yeah, exactly. So the first one is it's foil, 2 blue blue, counter a spell, but to cast for free you can discard an island and any other card, and it's a free counterspell. We mentioned how good those are.
Yeah, you go pretty down on value, but it is a budget free counterspell. It is 35 cents. Island, probably not impacting the game too much. So think of it like keep an island for later, and then you're really only discarding 1 other card, which could just be another land. It's not like some of these others that make you pitch actual spells. You could pitch nothing. If you're ramping, drawing cards, getting cards in your hand, then this feels pretty good.
Also on top of that, this one is, unlike most of the other ones, it is discard. Compared to exiling, where the cards are definitely gone, you can maybe discard a flashback spell and not lose as much value.
Or fuel a delve spell for later. And I just love how budget... I love that there's a free counterspell for the budget players.
Yes, it is nice. Next, one of my favorites, actually. It's very good. It's Glenalendra Archmage. It is 3 and a blue for a 2/2. It has pay a blue, sacrifice it, counter target non-creature spell, and has persist. So whenever it goes to the graveyard, if it didn't have a -1/-1 counter, it comes back to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it.
This was the distinction we wanted to make between Counterspell and Countermagic. I think Glenalendra Archmage is Countermagic, but it's not Counterspell. You can't, they cast Lightning Bolt and you got Glenalendra in your hand. You're not doing anything. Once it's out, though, I think that's Countermagic.
Yeah, I think something to be very aware about with this card is it's very good, and sometimes it's like sneaky good.
There's a lot. The persist just pushes it way over the edge. If you can blink it, if you can ++1 counters on it, then it's kind of like a hard lock, and they're going to have to answer with a creature.
Yes, on any synergies. This card is, again, this card is super strong, and I've played enough games against it. I've never played it. Played enough games in the answer to know this card's annoying.
It is the same kind of deal with Patron Wizard, except it's kind of like a 1-card engine where, hey, are you going to do something that is going to make me lose? Counter it. Oh, you're not? Okay, just chill.
Yeah, exactly. Next we have kind of the same card. We have Frilled Mystic and we have Mystic Snake. Both are 4 mana. Their mana cost is a little different, but they enter the battlefield and they counter a spell.
Yeah, 4 mana counter spell is terrible. coming with a creature, almost not good enough. But when you can blink it and just kind of just counter every spell or counter multiple spells, it gets pretty nuts.
Yes, exactly. If you have this in Eldrazi's Placer, it is pretty much a hard lock. How do you get around that? If they have 3 activations, that's 3 counters. I don't know how you beat that.
It's not like you have to counter the first thing they do. It's you have to play 3 game-altering counters or game-altering spells that would remove this lock pieces from the board, or else I'm just going to keep doing my thing and you won't be able to stop me.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very strong when you can blink them.
Deadeye Navigator is worse than Eldrazi Displacer, but it's the same thing, and once you get it going, it's even easier.
Next we have Rewind.
Yeah, it's rewind time.
2 blue for an instant counter target spell, and you untap 4 lands. But I wouldn't suggest this for almost any deck unless you really care about instants and something like Rashmi. I almost forgot her name again.
Yeah, the mana cost on Rewind matters, and it essentially costs 0. So you just get to the point where you cast it, you're going to draw a card off of it, maybe cast a 3-drop for free, and then it'll be free. So then the next turn you can cast another instant and do it again. Decks like that maybe Nimrus is also one because you cast it, draw a card, untap, then next turn you can cast something and draw a card off. So it's like flash type decks, or decks where maybe you have dual lands that make, or not dual lands, like bounce lands or lands that produce more than 1 mana, so it goes mana positive on it. You can cast like an X spell.
I would say the thing you want with this one is be sure in almost all cases you can use the mana, because if you're not, it's a bad counter spell.
Yeah, if you don't use the mana, we're going to talk about we don't like 3 mana counter spells, so the 4 obviously poop.
Yeah. Next we have Spell Swindle, which is 3 blue counter target spell. You get treasures equal to its converted mana cost. Again, you better care about these treasures a lot. It is a 5 mana counter spell, which is not good.
Not versatile.
Yes, it's not versatile. This is a bad spell. But if you have some way to take advantage of these treasures, you care about maybe sacrificing them. You care about them being tokens, like in a Brutaclad deck. Then at that point you can go, okay, Spell Swindle now fits in this deck.
Yes, it is kind of like a bad card that is still one of our favorites in the right deck. It can't be one of the best. It'll crack your top 5 because unlike the rest, there is a lot of opportunity for synergy. Also surprised that it's a 5 mana spell. And when we said the synergy goes way up when the mana cost goes up.
Yep, and we're talking moving on to the last one here. Very versatile because it can do a lot of things.
Oh yeah,
it is Sublime Epiphany, which is 4 blue. You could choose any number of these 5 modes. Counter target spell, counter target activated or triggered ability, draw a card, bounce target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, create a copy of a creature you control. Now, I would say you really have to make sure you care about these a lot. If you caring about the copying a creature is awesome. That's where you're really, when you care about that, getting a token of a creature you control already, that's when you're going to start wanting to play this card. The bouncing's not that relevant, but it's going to be gravy because you're just going to do it no matter what. And I do really like on this card, and I know we're going to talk about how we don't like this much, but that you can counter a triggered ability it's not great, but it's there when you need it on this one.
It's just extra. This card, that's not even part of it. But the fact that it's there, I'm thankful for. You can count, Ulamog's cast trigger. Well, okay, I can actually counter the spell and the ability now. This is a lot different from there's plenty of poopy counter spells around this 4, 5, 6, 7 range. Mm-hmm. Plenty of ones that we, everything not on this list is something we wouldn't really touch. Aside from, I'm sure there's 2 we forgot. But this one, not only a counter spell, it's only 2 of the modes. You can draw a card, bounce something, and copy. And this has more than the rest of them, the highest mana highest potential for mana advantage. If you copy a 6-drop, there's your 6 mana. Oh, but you also countered a spell, and you also bounce something that's 10 mana worth.
Yeah, exactly. It's very strong. Moving to a little subcategory of the best tier, we have CDH counters. These are ones you're going to see when you're playing real high levels of Magic. Some of them are good in regular EDH, and some are only good in CDH. We'll tell you what we think the differences are. First one, we got the free cards. Force of Will, Pact of Negation, Force of Negation, Commandeer, and Fierce Guardianship. We're not going to read these, but they all counter spells for free.
Yes, I will say the worst one of these 5 in regular Commander is probably Pact of Negation. Because paying 5 is quite a bit. You can't just fire it off willy-nilly.
Yeah, Pact Negation is also one. It's one that is played usually to protect combos. So if you're playing a combo, Pact Negation is much better.
Yeah, usually with Pact, you don't plan on paying the 5 because the game's not going to be around for that to happen. I will give the award for worst counterspell name to Force of Negations. They literally just took Force of Will and Pact of Negation and just pooped them together.
Yeah, I don't.
I hate that card so much.
Yeah, so I would play all of these in regular EDH except for maybe Pact of Negation. Next, we have
The ones.
These are the ones I wouldn't play at all. I would never put these into an EDH deck that I don't consider CDH or incredibly competitive, but not quite CDH.
Don't make fun of our own play group. All right, so the first two, Red Elemental Blast, Pyroblast. I've fiddled with putting these in like red decks before. Maybe Red and Boros, maybe you want them. Although sometimes having a dead card feels bad, but usually someone's playing blue. They either counter a blue spell or destroy a blue permanent.
Yeah, I would never play these in EDH in any sort of casual meta because, again, sometimes people don't come with blue. Sometimes it's like, I just want to play this deck and they don't have blue.
Yeah, it's just, they're a little weird. I'm not, it's tough talking about them because I'm not sure where I stand for regular EDH, but on CDH, they're obviously like pretty good.
Yeah. Next, Spell Pierce, one I would never, ever play except in CDH. This is a blue mana, counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. While we're here, and we're talking about paying 2, in almost all cases, we're not gonna want to do that. And Spell Pierce is no exception. I think this card is poo-poo in regular EDH, but if you had CDH, it's stellar because 1 mana interaction is so important.
This is one of the reasons we are not a CDH channel. We don't like CDH all that much. We've played it a couple times. It's fun every once in a while. I don't want to put Spell Pierce in my deck. I would rather go play Standard. It's like that to me is like a step too far. Personally, when I'm going to play EDH, like I want to be able to choose my deck with whatever I want. And then I want to be able to build the most competitive version of that I can. That's usually what we do. We go, hey, I want to play Brutaclad token nonsense. Well, okay, that's not competitive at all. But I can make it the most, like, this is the best I can make this deck. That's more of what I want to do than just what are the best cards I can play.
Okay. And this is something we've been wanting to mention for a little bit, and we haven't. You guys have to choose. Which one of you gets to hate on us? The CDH group or the casuals? We have been called CDH by so many people, and then CDH players come in like, this is way too casual of a channel for me. It's like, what? Which one are we?
We would like an answer by the end of the day. Just let us know. Are we a filthy casual because we like to play Arcane Denial? Or are we complete competitive trash because we think Counterspell is really good?
No, we complete trash because we don't like Grave Titan.
Yeah. Do we like promote feel bads and pub stomping? And it's like, well, we definitely don't do that.
We're a CEDH channel because we don't like Grave Titan.
Yeah. Nay, we hate Grave Titan. We hate his guts. We hate his zombie guts.
Next, we have Stifle. It's 1 blue, counter an activated or triggered ability. I don't like Stifle at all. I think it's a big trap for regular EDH.
Yes, but if you're worried about some of the best possible triggers like Protean Hulk, Thassa's Oracle, all this complete nonsense, it's actually pretty decent.
Yeah, it is strong, again, in CEDH.
You can counter fetch land if you're really feeling spiteful.
Oh yeah, that was the older legacy trick. Yes. Next.
And I wanted to share the only story I have with Stifle. I had a deck that every card in it was 1 mana, and I got to Stifle a World Gorger Dragon return trigger. And it's like, that is the only KO that deck ever had because everything was 1 mana. It's like, oh, yeah, he's dead.
Which is hilarious. Next, mana drain, blue, counter target spell. At the beginning of your next main phase, you get X colorless mana, where X is that spell's converted mana cost.
Now, there's a debate. Is this better than Counterspell?
Is mana drain better than Counterspell? I think it's called... In Magic terms, it's strictly better.
Strictly better, yeah. Mana Drain takes Counterspell's hopes and dreams and just dumps on them all.
Yeah, Mana Drain's insane. There's not much to talk about this card. This is one of the best Counterspells that you have to pay the mana for.
The best Counterspell that costs mana?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
Probably, yeah. I don't know how. There's not really a debate there.
No, see, this is where we get yelled at by the CEDH players telling us Spell Pierce is better. Okay, the next one. This is another classic for CEDH, Tail's End. Counter a legendary spell or an activated or triggered ability. So you can't counter regular spells. Apparently, they've got enough not spells things going on that this is totally fine. This card is actually, if you have them in your bulk bin, because they might be trash to you, CDH players love it. This is a couple bucks.
I mean, I'll be honest. Like, we don't play much CDH, but you have like a CDH-esque Carador deck. Tails would be great against that deck because the fact of the matter is you're always trying to protein Hulk and go off that way. That's your main win con.
Yeah.
You stifle that trigger. Now it just puts you way in a position where you're not winning right now.
And you know, at least with Tails, you know, it's not dead. They have a commander. Presumably, it's relevant. So maybe consider putting it in one of your higher power decks. If you're like lower power, I wouldn't bother. What are you going to counter a Grave Titan attack trigger?
Our boy Aspiring Spike loves Tails End in Modern.
Oh, yeah. Didn't you say Reed Duke got owned by it?
Yeah, in Reed Duke's newest video. Let's just talk. I mean, why not? Reed Duke's newest video, he's playing the new Titan for Modern. First match he gets up against Aspiring Spike. He goes, tap my Elvish Reclaimer, sacrifice my land, and then he goes...
to go search for a land.
To search for land. Tails End the trigger. Boom! What a blowout.
Wasteland, Time Walk. What?
It was so good. Oh,
so yeah, Wasteland, Time Walk, better than Mana Drain. Moving on. Mystical Dispute. 2 and a blue, counter a spell unless they pay 3. Or it just costs blue if you counter a blue spell, and then they have to pay 3.
Again, only a CDH card.
Every deck is blue. I think almost every deck is blue in that format.
Yeah, it's very rare that they're not. What's Blood Pot? I think that's not blue, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that's even a real... That was an old thing.
Yeah,
that was a Timnatana.
That's the first one I could think of that doesn't have blue.
Yeah, and that's another reason that if we have mentioned Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast, everything's blue.
Yeah.
Even Thousands Oracle, like the go-to win condition, is blue.
Yeah, so save that one for CDH. And Nimble Obstructionist. This one is a 3/1 flyer with flash. You don't care about that, though. You pay 2 and a blue and you cycle it, and it can stifle something.
It's kind of cool that for versatility, sometimes it's a creature with evasion. This one is playable in regular Commander. Just depends on what you're doing.
Yeah. Again, this is a card, me personally, never going to touch it.
Just not interested.
Just not interested, but I can see where it'd be good.
I'm sure there's a deck that this is like the top 5. It cracks that synergy where it like pushes out, Arcane Denial or whatever and gets to be good. Like maybe there's an all creatures deck somewhere, like an all creature blue deck, and you're just like, I got counterspells. What about it?
Moving on, we have Traps.
Everyone's favorite, Traps.
Yes, so these are cards that we wouldn't play. We're not interested in these cards, and we're going to tell you why we don't like them. First and foremost, for all of our Kens watching,
friend of the show, Ken.
Friend of the show, Ken. Mana Tithe. Card is unplayable.
Mana Tithes, Force Spike, anything we've talked about. We've actually disqualified Mana Tithe from being playable like 5 times in this video, but we're going to do it specifically now. We said anything where you always get the choice of paying mana, and then we said any Force Spike, and then we said any white counterspell that isn't Warping Whale or Lapse of Certainty. So Mana Tithe, even if you didn't hear it before, officially on our Traps list.
Yes. So next one is actually Mana Leak. Again, they have to pay 3 mana. If you're making them pay mana, it's usually not going to be good. That's what we've hit. There are exceptions, obviously, especially the CDH ones. You see that. But I don't think there was any on our regular list that makes them pay mana at all. Yeah,
well, we totally, like I mentioned, we forgot Mystic Confluence, which is one of our favorites.
Yeah.
That one can make them pay mana. But if you really want to counter the spell, 3, 6, 9, that starts to be really tough. You have the choice. It doesn't have to be a counter spell. That card's super versatile and awesome. And pretend I said this 10 minutes ago. But other than that, I don't think we have any.
This next one's interesting because it's sort of similar to Arcane Denial. It's reman. It's 1 in the blue. Counter a spell. If it's countered this way, it goes back to its owner's hand instead of the graveyard, and you draw a card. So you're getting your card back, but you're not really answering the spell. It depends though. Like in a big splash meta, I think this card's good.
It's tempo play. If you go up on mana, you're not down on cards, and they are actually down the mana they spent. Even the spell's not in play; it's in their hand. They're still down that mana, and it kind of has a delay effect where, oh shoot, he's got Grave Titan in hand. Everybody get him.
But overall, we think this is a trap. We think mostly you just want to avoid it. Again, maybe a meta call.
It's like $4, so not too budget friendly. I want my counterspells. I mean, we just mentioned like 4 10-cent ones that we're super happy with, and I mean, in case it wasn't abundantly clear, I have absolutely nothing against power level any number. I have played Magic at every power level. They are all completely valid ways to play. We're just teasing Grave Titan because it's a meme on the channel.
We don't like that card.
Yeah, we don't think Grave Titan's good. You're fully welcome to disagree, and there is no objective opinion.
Next, we have Thassa's Intervention. X blue, counter target spell unless its controller plays twice X. Or look at the top X cards of your library, put 2 in your hand, and the rest on the bottom in a random order. I think that sounds horrible. So now we're just looking at the counterspell side. it's a bad counterspell. I also don't think it's a very good counterspell. At a 4 mana, they have to pay 4 mana for their spell. I don't like that spell at all.
It caps out at a draw 2. I mean, I'm not saying this should have been anything else, but I don't think it's quite there. We're also not, I mean, this kind of made us think we don't really like any of the X spell counterspells. There's not too many, but Condescend is like the best one I can think of. Syncopate, I think. Syncopate, Spell Burst, Spell Clash, whatever they're all called. They're just a bunch of X, and I think they're all pretty bad.
Clash of Wills, that's what it is. But I think Spell Burst might be one. I don't know. The Spell Burst is like
complete garbage. That card is...
It's buyback, right?
I think it's X blue, counter a spell, cost X, then it's like buyback for like 7 blue, concede the game. I don't know.
No, I don't think it's that bad.
Oh, you don't think?
Next, this is a like kind of a catch-all. We'll list the ones that we're talking about, but it's 3 mana overall counter spells that are just counter a spell. So it's you pay 3 mana and you counter a spell. There's just not many that you want to play at all. So we don't like Disallow. We don't like Void Slime, Cancel, Dissolve, Dissipate, Hinder, Soul Manipulation, and Forbid. They all fit into this like category of 3 mana, not good enough.
We mentioned the ones we like, and I think the rest of them we're just not interested. There's too many sweet 2/1s, too many sweet 2 drops, even at budget levels, that I don't think you have to stoop to a Disallow. And yeah, you can get the trigger. I don't think that bumps it up because you're never getting more than one card. It's still a 3 mana 1-for-1. We talked about like Disallow feels like the hero's downfall of counterspells. Like I'm never gonna feel good doing that.
Yeah, I agree with that. These all like Cancel and Dissolve. They just all feel the same. They feel so sameish. Where you're just not getting enough.
Whatever tiny little extra tidbit you want to give on cancels so you can make this card a rare, I'm not interested in. Yeah. None of that. Scry 1, exile. None of it's worth it.
I mean, there are things that would be, but these ones aren't there.
Yeah, I mean, draw a card, draw 2 cards.
Next, we have Cryptic Command. This is 1 blue for an instant, and it has you can choose 2 of the 4 modes. Counterspell, draw a card, tap down all creatures your opponents control, return target permanent to its owner's hand.
Enough of those are not relevant to make this more than fancy counterspell.
Yeah, exactly. It's just and you can't choose them all. If you could choose them all, maybe the tap is almost never going to be relevant. It might save you a combat once in a blue moon, but I wouldn't look forward to doing that too often. Drawing a card is we're going to talk about in a second. Counterspell, draw a card for 4 mana, not very good.
We mentioned maybe for 3, 4, just where I'm like I'm out. This 4-drop counterspell has to be amazing. Some of the only ones we listed were Foil, which is free, Remand, which is free in certain decks, and then the rest of them were abusable creatures.
Yes. Next, Dismiss. 4 mana counterspell, draw a card. No, thank you.
First of all, it's worse than Cryptic Command. Also, Cryptic Command's hard to cast, so maybe in any case where it's not worse than Cryptic Command, they're both equally bad. Get them out.
Agreed. What's Fuel for the Cause?
I see this all the time. This is going to be my Grave Titan of counterspells. This is my complete pet peeve. It's 2 blue instant counter target spell, proliferate. It's not enough. It's not enough. I'm sorry. It's 4 mana for a 1-for-1 trade. It's a counterspell, so it's not always they don't cast anything, you don't get to counter it. You're not gonna I'm not feeling good if I'm countering a cultivate. If you want to proliferate, do it on offense, not on defense.
Yeah, I don't like that card at all. 2 cards I want to mention together: Solemn Command, which can do counter non-creature spells, and Ojutai's Command, which can counter creature spells. I don't like either of these. None of their modes are even close to relevant enough for me to warrant a 4 or a 5 mana cost.
Yeah. You have to hold this up. Mm-hmm. If there's nothing to do, you can fire these off. Although Ojutai's Command is almost a whiff for like firing it off without countering something.
It's bad.
And then Slumgar's Command is kind of just a weird removal spell where if I'm paying 5 mana for removal, I'm not happy. 5 mana for a 2-for-1, not quite good enough in Commander. At pretty much any power level, you can just do better at every step of the way. Even in budget, you can do better.
Yeah, I've seen both of these cards in Commander. Never been impressed with them, especially Ojutai's Command. Like, extra unimpressed with that one.
Yeah, gaining 4 life is nothing. 2-drop is almost nothing.
Yeah, dead mode.
And like we said, I'd so much rather hold up a 2-drop. It's more than twice as easy to hold up a 2-drop. What we got? Insidious Will's next. This can either counter a spell or copy a spell.
Neither of those modes is good enough. Not even close to good enough, honestly.
Nope. And then the last 2, Desertion and Spelljack. These are more fun than good. If you're like looking to cause some chaos, or you have a deck that maybe it synergizes with, yeah, totally. I just think if you're gonna say what are the 5 staple counterspells I should be playing, these are nowhere near the top 20.
Yeah, exactly. They're both just basically you just get to take the spell afterwards, depending on.
Desertion hits artifacts or creatures, and Spelljack is any spell, but Spelljack is 3 blue, blue, blue.
And it doesn't work in commanders because they put it in the command zone instead of exile.
Yes, so those are our traps, and that is the video.
Yes, special shout outs to all of our patrons. We love you all as much as we can without making you uncomfortable. Thank you all for the support. The continued support that we keep receiving has been almost overwhelming. But
What a year.
But we can handle it.
Yes.
We can handle no matter how much support you throw at us. We can handle it. So feel free to throw as much support as you want at us.
Yeah, you'll just get more giveaways. Try me, bro. Like I'll take it all. Last year, the last couple of months, we really started ramping up stuff. I'm excited to see. We had a goal last year of 10,000 subscribers. Crushed it.
That was okay. At the beginning of the year last year, BZ asked, like, we did, what is your goal for the year? And I'm like, 10,000 subs. He's like, that's gonna be tough. I'm like, maybe.
We had what, 2 or 3, and we were growing at like 100 or 200 a month.
Yeah, and we talked about it. We're like, it's gonna be tough. I'm like, yeah, but growth is exponential, and we're gonna keep working on it.
It was lofty, and we nailed it. So what is our goal for this year?
30,000 subs.
30,000 by the end of the year.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty sweet. That's really only
doubling our subs.
It's way less than what your goal was last time, which was tripling or quadrupling.
Yeah.
So that sounds doable to me. I would love to make it happen. This is kind of our tidbit, by the way. You can also go to the TCG player link in the description, buy stuff, and we get a kickback. But I'd rather talk about how cool we are.
Yeah.
I also kind of want to do gameplay this year. I don't know. I feel it's taking us forever. I want to get it done maybe towards the end of the year.
We need to, honestly, and this is something we're going to have to do probably my prediction is by about the summer of this year, we can finally start a real Kickstarter program to really, because we need a lot of stuff. We're going to need a space to do this. We currently, with our living situations, we just don't have a space to record gameplay.
We are planning on getting a kind of like getting a home base where we're just going to live in the same house. It's going to be a Nitpicking Nerds pad. But we're still going to need a space for basically an entire room filled with nothing but gameplay equipment.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all about getting that Kickstarter going and getting ourselves into a position financially that we can actually do gameplay.
Go all out.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be as high quality as we can really make it. We don't want to skimp on anything when it comes to gameplay.
That's why we're not doing it. We could make gameplay that's totally fine. We just want to make amazing gameplay. We want it to start perfect, or and start as good as we can and then improve it.
Exactly. But that's the tidbit, and that's everything about this video.
Yeah.
We're heading out. Peace out, Tribe Scout.